and welcome to another episode of Doubl3Tap. Today we are joined by Brandon and Wei, co-founders and CEO, CTO, and COO respectively of Arena X Labs, who are building our AI arena. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
We're doing well. How's it going, guys? Great to be
Doing
on.
great.
Yeah, looking forward to this one. Before we move on to the questions, quick disclaimers out the way. The thoughts here shared by Alex and I are our own. The content is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and we may have investments in some of the companies or assets discussed throughout the show. Fellas, switching up a little bit, what game, because I know you're busy building, right? So what games are you most excited to play once the stretch goals are over with?
Brandon, you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. This might not come as a surprise because we're building a platform fighting game, but I really like platform fighters. And so there's one in particular that I'm really excited about. It's called Rivals 2. I don't know if you guys played Rivals of Ether, but it's like a awesome platform fighting game with like really unique and novel mechanics. And I love what they do with like how they actually differentiate from other platform fighting games. And so I'm really excited to try out Rivals 2 whenever I have some time.
I was fully expecting you to say multiverses, but that's a refreshing take.
It's a bit too slow for me if I'm being honest. Yeah, but I mean, no shade at all. No shade at all. It's just a little too slow for my playing style.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, I think for me personally, I actually have early access to a lot of games in Web3 that I haven't had a chance to actually dig into. So one that I'm very excited to try if I had the time would be Wildcard. And then the other kind of studio that I've been a big fan of following what they're doing is Oh Baby Games. And what they're doing there, I think, obviously they have the kind of the racing game out, and I know there's a few other titles that they're going to be coming out soon. I keep getting prompts in my email about getting early access to all of those games, so I feel like I need to catch up on that subject to when I have the time. So I think those are a couple of things that I'm watching out for in Web3 specifically.
Never enough time in the day for the games, right? A quick question, actually, Brandon. What are some of the mechanics that you really like? Just for maybe the audience that's not as deep on platform fighters. I think most people are probably familiar with Smash, but what did you like about Rivals specifically?
Yeah, I mean, like, so many of their characters have like really like unique stuff, like to the point like some characters like you can place like a puddle that you can basically like if you're off platform you can come back up through that puddle that you placed on the stage, like really like unique stuff like that. Everything is like super well thought through and very different for each character. I don't know, I love it. I remember I actually had all my game developers like play Rivals of Ether to see like, okay, this is like how you properly like think through like unique mechanics that they, I don't want to say they're all balanced, but achieve a pretty good balance with like very different mechanics. It's just really cool. Everything's really well thought through.
Okay, cool. So yeah, quickly kind of getting right into the meat of things here. So everybody knows you guys for AI Arena, but I think what people may know a little bit less about is the ARC infrastructure, SAI, basically some of the other things you guys are working on in parallel as you're developing AI Arena. So we were hoping to kind of dig into that. So maybe let's kick it off with the ARC infrastructure product, which to my understanding is, hey, there is an admin kind of maybe portal where you can use the AI platform infrastructure that you guys have created to help kind of manage in real time through this API. And then you've got a model API that allows a little bit more granular kind of development. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just want to kind of set the stage for the audience. So first question is, how does this simplify AI development for developers through that model API specifically, I would say?
Yeah, so for developers, there's two main things, well, maybe three, but one of them is basically like the creation of specific model architectures, right? So like we will build a suite of model architectures, and they basically choose which ones they want to use in their games. And that's more of like the process of setting everything up so that they can start incorporating them into their games. And then afterwards, that's called like basically the registry. So like each game can register a certain number of types of models that they can then use in their game. And then there's the actual model part where they can basically like create new models according to the architectures they registered. It's literally just one line of code to create a new model. They specify like the user's like identifier, what type of model they want, so on and so forth, and then boom, it's created. And then we also have very simple interfaces to train. Again, it's just one line of code. Whenever you feed in the data, some training parameters, and then same thing for inference. It's very simple, just another line of code. So basically, like there is some other stuff that they might have to do, such as defining what we call the state, which is like a categorization of the world. But it's super, super simple, right? They just register a model, load it in, create a new one if they don't have one already saved. And yeah, and then they could just start training and save it and perform inference. Like super simple.
And when you say it just makes it super simple, could you maybe kind of contextualize with respect to maybe the current state of like, hey, if somebody else wants to pull something like this off the shelf, does that exist? If it doesn't exist, is it just
No.
maybe the single line of code that makes it easier? Or, what else does it make easier? The training of the model
Yeah,
specifically?
specifically the training of the model. Yeah, there's a lot of like off the shelf like solutions that is basically just a wrapper around something like a TensorFlow or a PyTorch. Really, that makes a very plain vanilla model that will work in some contexts. Usually, they don't work in most specific contexts, especially in the context of gaming. Specifically, the thing that we're trying to solve is this concept of like continual learning, right? Because we expect users to be able to train over the lifetime of their playing. Essentially, it's not like a one and done thing, right? It's you want this thing to continually evolve, and there's one big problem that we had to solve, and we spent 2 years trying to solve it on our game. This technical term is called catastrophic forgetting, but really what it is, it's when you introduce new information, it forgets what it previously learned, right? And so we had to find a way to maintain this thing that you taught it last month while still teaching it new stuff and have it continually build upon skills. And so there isn't really an out of the box solution for this right now. And so yeah, basically we've been researching this for the past 2 years, have been literally doing playtests nonstop, and continue to improve it to the point where users are now able to like continually build upon strategies that they've been working on for months and months and months, and continually kind of improve it. And we basically have that ready to go in one line of code through our SDK.
Could I just add a little bit of like a little bit of broader context? And Brandon, you may want to speak to this concept of continual learning, and in contrast to how what we've seen most other AI gaming and how people are introduced kind of AI into that experience. Because from my vantage point, this concept of continual learning is very, very important because in our game and what ARC enables is that the human player has full control in terms of how their AI performs, right? So the performance of their AI, the actions of their AI is purely the result of human teaching and the data that the human has created. In contrast to a lot of other games that are quote unquote powered by AI, what's actually happening is basically there is still this core model that's kind of creating what I would call a broader spectrum of like distribution of outcomes in the behavior of a core model. And then the gameplay is still very much kind of the selection of one of those outcomes. It's not as if like someone's actually creating data that's specifically training their own model. It's still like a mapping to a kind of a central model that's creating these outputs, and then the human players are still basically exploring the boundaries of these outputs coming out of one model. So it's a radically different approach to kind of training agents, and the benefits of which are very, very high fidelity transfers of the human intention into an AI that now represents them. It's extremely like bespoke and personal. The other thing is the infrastructure itself is extremely scalable. So from a cost perspective, there's massive amounts of savings over time. And this is a big, big problem that's going to be confronting a lot of AI games going forward, is how are they going to scale the back-end costs? And they're going to become a victim of their success if they start to scale users, because that cost is going to proliferate aggressively and very, very quickly. So our system solves for that. And I think, Brandon, you can probably give the figures, but I think it's like 1,000 times improvement in terms of like cost efficiency across the board.
Yeah, minimum. But yeah, just actually building on that, the reason why we spent a lot of time doing this research is back when we started this, I used to be a decentralization maxi. And so I wanted the models on chain. If we had data, I didn't want to store it centralized. I wanted the user to own everything. And we certainly could not store that on chain because there's way too much data that the user is generating. And so the idea was, okay, can we embed all the data that it's seen ever into the model and have it never forget that? That's where we started, and then store the model on chain. That was the whole idea. And then the trick there though is that every time you introduce new data, you update the model parameters. Now it overrides what it previously learned, and so we needed a way to basically have this model that doesn't forget important information over the lifetime of user journey. And our users are literally training like 10 to 20 times a day, like every single day. And so this was really hard to solve. But yeah, now we don't have to store any data over like multiple years, and it's just embedded in this model. And we spend a lot of time focusing on making small performant models to make costs like basically almost zero. What I would say is nothing happens autonomously in our game. Everything is intentional. We specifically designed it this way because we wanted the outcome to be a reflection of the human skill. In fact, when we started, we had a mix of, because our platform is based on imitation learning, we had a mix of imitation learning and reinforcement learning. And reinforcement learning is this like autonomous learning paradigm where it learns through some reward mechanism. And not only did it take away from the human skill aspect, but it frustrates users more than people think when this thing learns autonomously, because reinforcement learning is weird sometimes, where like, let's say you're here and the optimal is here, right? You don't quite know when you're at the optimal, and so sometimes on the path to there, it actually makes the model worse. And we saw that very often, right, where it has to traverse what we call the lost landscape, and it like goes down these like troughs and peaks, and a lot of times it'll like stop. The model will stop because they'll specify, I want to train for this many time, and they'll check on the model, and it's like, why the hell is it doing what it's doing, right? But sometimes it needs to explore to get to that point, right? And so we ultimately removed it out, not only because it didn't reflect human skill, but also because it was causing these unexpected behaviors. And people that do machine learning understand this, but people that don't, which is people that we're trying to target gamers, they often don't understand this and get very frustrated with it. So we actually took this out. So now everything is intentional. People show their agents, I want you to do this, and they're playing the game. They're like, I want you to do this in this situation, and then they kind of tell the agent how they want it to learn.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's almost like a trophy system. You know what I mean? Like it's a collection of all your best plays to then be like, my agent is better than yours because I'm a better player. Like there's more, I guess, pride from a player expensive. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
How easy is it for developers to integrate this to a game that's been live for years? Let's take Smash, for example, because and to step back a bit, like I think what kind of strikes me as quite cool is that hypothetically you could be in a position where there are these AI agents for like some of the world's best competitive players, and then I, as a fan of the game, can be like, okay, I want to play Mango at Smash. and you know what I mean. So how easy is it for developers to kind of integrate this tech, and does it evolve into a decentralized platform for these agents to kind of live on one day?
So all the training stuff, inference, they don't have to worry about. The developers just need to worry about two things. One of them is defining the state space. Kind of like I mentioned before, this is basically like what are the inputs that the machine learning algorithms receive, right? So for example, in like a game like a platform fighter, like one input could be like how far away you are from one of your opponents, right? That's one of the inputs. And then you can construct basically like a lot of these, and it's up to the developer they can either work with us on this, we can help them out and say like what we think is the best for the current game, but they just need to create some function based on the game world to extract the state. Right, that's one thing they have to do. It's not that hard. That could be done maybe in like a day. And then the other thing they need to do is to define some data collection algorithm. We will have some built-in ones, but for some games, you might want to have something a bit more bespoke. And again, we'll work with developers on that. But I'll give you an example. So like our fighting game is 60 frames per second. We don't necessarily need to sample the state action pairs every frame, right? Because it's unnecessary. Like for like 10 frames in a row, it's going to be the exact same thing, or most likely the same thing, right? And so you can imagine a simple way to do it is like, frame 1 to frame 10. It's very similar, and so you just extract those two, but maybe on frame 5, if something drastic changed, you might want to sample that one. And so now you go from 60 frames per second to maybe like, I don't know, like 5 to 10 frames per second of data that you're sampling. So we might need to work with them on that. Again, this is not difficult at all, and we'll provide a lot of boilerplate that they can integrate. But those are the only two things that are the big lifts. And then it comes down to like them designing the UI, right? We provide all the functionality, but it's just how do they want to engage with their users to basically like, where do they want to inject the training in the site or in the game that they're making and all that stuff. So that's basically it. We take care of all the what I think is the hard stuff.
Which genre are each of you guys most excited for? Can't choose fighters.
I can't choose fighter. So last week I was in Austin for Consensus, and I was talking to people about ARC. One particular conversation was really interesting. Like this guy, he loves playing like NBA 2K and these sports sim games. He's like, and he immediately got the concept. He's like, I log online with my friends, and it's very hard for us to get a 5-person team together to play against another team that seems to always have 5 people. So now we're stuck with 2 guys and 3 basically bots, and we know we're gonna lose. So he's like, are you able to allow me to basically be able to train like 3 bots on my team so that they're inheriting my play style, and then I can deploy a team together where I have higher confidence that they're much more adept at playing the team game than these like pre-baked bots? I'm like, yes, that's exactly the concept. So you can extrapolate that to, it's not even just genres. Like there's all of these types of applications in different types of game environments. And I think that is an area that I'd love for us to kind of work on. And I think in this arena shooter, we might have the ability to kind of do that as well. And it would be a great showcase because it helps to obviously improve the overall experience for players across different types of modalities within games.
Before we hear your answer, Brandon, I just want to say I love that example. Like I literally decide with my friend group what games we're going to play based on how many people we can fill in the party. So like if we have 5, then 5-person game for whatever. That's literally how I choose what games I play now. So yeah, 2 thumbs up. Anyways, Brandon, would love to hear your opinion as well.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. One of them that I would add is live money gaming. Specifically, this enables something very unique. If you can train a replica of yourself to play like yourself, and you can basically bankroll it, now you can simultaneously play at 20 tables at once, which is great. And so you have an instant pickup on your potential profitability, or I guess your loss if you're not good. But the platform, the people that are enabling this, they have an instant pickup in profitability. So they're certainly very excited about this. So yeah, that's something we're really pumped about.
You've kind of alluded to this already, but I'm curious for a little more depth on like how permissionless this system is. Exactly how much data needs to be shared and how much the developer needs to trust you guys as a platform. For an example, I reckon there's maybe a potential scenario here where the IP owner feels a certain way about sharing a lot of this data with a third party site, and there's a trust factor there. And then there's another scenario where perhaps it's the player who's like, I really want to do this. I really want to integrate my favorite game. But for reasons X, Y, and Z, the developer is never going to do it. So yeah, like
Yes.
on the permissionless side of things, how does that work?
I'll start with the second one. There is a way to bootstrap it. I used to do it. I would not publicly show people how I do it because it'll make the games really mad. But there is certainly a way to do it. Um, um, Someone will figure it out as soon as we release the SDK. I'm sure of it, and they'll be able to start training their own AIs to play these games. We require very minimal from the game developer. We literally only require them to send us like state and action data, nothing else that have to do with the game. And maybe they think that is sensitive, but if they thought that was sensitive, I don't think they would use our SDK. If I'm being completely honest. And we don't store any of that data either. Like that's part of the beauty of like our system. Like I mentioned earlier, everything's embedded in the models. And then for inference, it doesn't even hit our servers. Inference is done client side as well.
What is from your guys' perspective, what's the upside for the developer? I can understand quite clearly the upside for the player. What do you think? Why should developers be excited for something like this?
Yeah, I think it's because it's good for the player, right? And I think they would want more players on their platform. For example, like it solves a massive player liquidity issue, right? Like going into a queue and like not being able to match anyone, it's great that you're able to match against, even though they are bots, they play like humans.
Yeah, I think player liquidity is a big one. I mean, that's honestly one of the biggest requests from ARC so far from third-party studios. And like the other aspect that Brandon already highlighted is monetization intensity and velocity as well, especially for some of these certain genres. We call it parallel play, which means that once a human is able to transfer your skill into a digital vessel, that digital vessel is 24/7, 365 available, and it can be simultaneously deployed across many different instances. There's no limitations anymore because it's purely just code execution. So that player liquidity directly translates to the opportunity for monetization. Not to guarantee monetization, but there's many more kind of nodes and interactions between those nodes to increase the potential for monetization, which is up for the team to be like to think about how they can capture that opportunity set. And then the last one that I would highlight is like competitive integrity. So in our system, what it is it preserves the skill content of the game, but it's also, like I said before, it's like a high fidelity transfer of the intention behind the player. So the process of transferring your skills to an AI is deliberately higher friction because it helps to create that integrity in that experience, because then not everyone can do it. And if everyone can do it, then it's no longer valuable.
I'm going to get a bit philosophical here, but I'm curious to see how you guys are thinking about it. I can potentially foresee a future where there will be a mix of these imitation bots, let's call them, where it's based on real human input and a collection of someone's best moments. And then there will be players who are not good, but have realized that they can take like, I guess, more generative styles of AI learning to combine the best bits of these models to create an even better one, similar to like what DeepMind did with chess. And these are now going to battle it out, right? What becomes the distinguishing factor between these two approaches?
My view is that it is on the developer to make it as hard as possible for the second group of people that you highlighted, these people that are putting together the different models essentially, right? Like the best bits of the different models to create like a super model. The developer has to do a lot of work to try and prevent that from happening. You have to run things server side, and you have to take as many efforts as you can to limit people's ability to like infer what these other models are doing.
I also think that's a good segue to Psi though, because your second example, Jacko, is basically what Psi is, and I think underlying this is a little bit of a tangent, is a fundamental belief that the way that current the current industry, especially in competitive gaming, is trying to solve the cheating problem is not going to work. Like it's basically a cat and mouse game, and the cheaters are going to get more and more sophisticated. You cannot enforce that in any truly effective way when it's still fundamental to the core problem that you can't prevent these type of like algorithms or models from entering a human-based competition to begin with. So what we've done with Psi, part of what we've done with Psi is to say, hey, Psi is deliberately designed for people to go and like use the most radical ideas, the most innovative models that are currently available, and just build the best AI or algorithm that you can possibly conceive for different types of games. That's what Psi is. So in some ways, it's like sanctioned cheating. So it's like, if you're really good at cheating, we're going to give you a platform to go nuts, right? But what's fascinating about that is, obviously, I think the content output of it, I'm fascinating to see how models solve these problems when you give them the resources like compute and data to be able to kind of learn different ways of solving these game problems.
Yeah, so talking about Psi is the easiest way to understand it, or this is how I'm processing it in my mind, is it's kind of like a democratized platform to allow people to create their own Voyager AIs.
That's certainly one approach that people can take, is they can take that type of approach to building. What we wanted it to be is basically like first and foremost a machine learning contest. We're specifically starting off focusing on reinforcement learning, but if you have any other algorithms, you can for sure use them as well to compete in these games. But the starting point will be focused on reinforcement learning. But yeah, the idea is we have all these different types of game environments, which is what we're doing is we're reframing complex problems as games. And yeah, we have people basically competing to make the best agents to participate in these little game worlds.
How do you kickstart the flywheel for a platform like that? Like I can kind of see that maybe there's a 0-1 challenge there.
Our focus now is basically focus on the machine learning researchers, specifically at the collegiate level. Basically, we want to build like a big talent pool that's very passionate about machine learning to be on our platform. We almost want it to be a hub, and at first we're going to focus on reinforcement learning, so we want it to be kind of like a hub for reinforcement learning. And then once there is kind of a lot of talent on the platform, I think naturally game studios will want to like offer their environments onto the platform, because they know they'll get some great quality submissions, and it's a win-win in my opinion, because these researchers hopefully they'll be able to make money doing what they love, which is building models for games.
Yeah, and I think speaking more about like the go-to-market strategy there, like the starting point, it is very much like a two-sided marketplace. The key differentiation about Psi to those kind of users is probably the most interesting competition that they'll ever compete in, or they have ever competed in. And that's because the framing of the problem is different, because it is focused more on reinforcement learning. But then also there's also this kind of visual interactivity layer to the output of what they're building, right? As most traditional competitions, you're competing on some numbers. It's like it's an index score that you're competing on. And it's like, great, but it's just not the same as watching your model perform something in an interactive environment that's a game. And then, by the way, then there's also this kind of social layer on top of it, because you can now see all of the other competitors out there, what their models are doing.
I think maybe as a final question, why is gaming such an attractive medium for everything that we've just been speaking about, as opposed to AI companions, chatbots, more on the generative side, like all of the above, right? Why gaming?
Well, the first thing is, and this is actually why we started building a game for a company, is we find that it's great of abstracting away complexity. Basically, we're reframing machine learning research as a game. And now the concept of like a learning rate, an epoch, a batch size, it's just new game mechanics that they're learning, right? And like competitive people learn like really in-depth game mechanics, right? And so it's like, this is just a different type of game mechanic. It's just a different name for a move. You learn all these different names. And now we've made machine learning a lot more approachable.
Yeah, the only thing I would add as an extension is, like, if you think about AI Arena, ARC, SAI, like what we're trying to really achieve is using and remixing kind of technological forces that are at play to create a new way for people to, monetize, to have fun, and to learn. And really the idea is like just get more people into AI. Difficulty is actually the thing here. Like, you can't make things too simple. By virtue of having something difficult, you can steer people to progress and push the envelope and make breakthroughs. The other thing that's great about games is that it's naturally engaging. There's a progression curve, and it almost helps people replenish that natural internal motivation to stick with something, right? That's very powerful, right? Because you want people to pipe through that funnel and stick with it, so that more people can get out the other side. So using games as an apparatus to solve this human capital problem is really at the center and at the heart of like the philosophical underpinning of why we set up Arena X Labs in the first place. I think we're still super early in that journey, but like 2.5 years later, 3 years later, we have the foundations built. That was like what we had done in the last 2.5 years, and it was a lot of hard work. And now is not to say that looking forward is any easier, but certainly we're looking more at like the commercialization, bringing people to use it, and then using that kind of feedback loop to enhance the product and continue to scale the network. But yeah, at its core, I think those are the things that we're trying to solve, and we're using games as a medium to help us create this new version of a world, right? Whereas historically, maybe people thought games are just like, they're not important, they're trivial, people are wasting time doing this type of stuff. We want to reframe that and offer people an opportunity to see that you can really create impact in the world through the medium of gaming. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question, but that's really at the heart of like why we started this in the first place, and why we're still here.
Love that.
It's like crypto zombies for ML.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Absolutely.
It's a great analogy.
Freaking love crypto zombies. So that exactly.
Yeah, me too. Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, fellas, I think that just about wraps it up for this episode. It's been an absolute pleasure, actually. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us, guys. Yeah, it was awesome.
The content of this video is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. The views shared by Alex and I are our own, and we may hold investments in some of the companies or digital assets featured in the video.